how's it going, my fellow starlings? Welcome to a Season 2, Episode 7 recap, breakdown, and review. And in all honesty, this episode felt like a little bit of an interlude, sort of kind of a bridge after such an explosive Episode 6. With the latter of that episode, I feel like what they're trying to do is not necessarily cool off, but yeah, as I kind of mentioned, interlude into the next period. But that also serves as some setup for Eclipso to do a little bit of trolling, if you know what I mean. But also in this episode, we had some really good moments. I think quite a few of us were surprised by Jake Austin Walker returning as Brainwave Jr. I'm very, very happy about that. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get through the details of this episode. It feels like quite a linear episode. There wasn't a whole bunch going on, so we might get in some theory crafting and whatnot. But go ahead and like this video if you guys do go ahead and enjoy it. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Got a lot of videos going out in the next couple of days. We've got a Titans review coming out tomorrow, but also there's 3 episodes of Doom Patrol, which I do have 2 videos already recorded, so make sure you keep an eye out on the channel for that. So, this episode picks right up with Yolanda in that confession booth again, looking quite nervous, and, you know, she's talking with the priest, and she's kind of analogizing her situation or comparing what she did to Brainwave or what she might still have to do, because she feels like out of all the JSA, as we learn later on in the episode, she might have to be the one to kind of kill again. Once again, in this moment, she gets the Brainwave type sound in her head, yet Eclipso isn't even here. So in this moment in my notes, I still don't get this because it felt like they were fairly inconsistent with it, but I'm very super glad that they addressed that this episode, because that's another thing I really want to latch onto in the fact that this did happen way before Eclipso even escaped the Black Diamond. Fair enough if Cindy had infected the priest to do that when we first ever saw Yolanda's little brainwave whammy sound effect come in that first episode of the season, but that wasn't the case. Like that really wasn't the case, and I like how in this episode they even leave it a little bit open to interpretation with how Brainwave could have gone into her mind after his death. It was either that or Eclipso, or it's in her head. So that kind of does explain a lot when it's just left to the last 2 things, in that Brainwave really did enter her mind when she died, which is kind of a cool comic book reference. Now, I'm not scratched up on all my lore here, and it's gone out of my head a little bit since season 1, but I think there is a story where Brainwave did actually implant himself, so to speak, in his son, Henry's mind, and he lived through him. So it was kind of like a parallel to that in a way with what Brainwave suggested to her later on in the episode, but we all knew that this wasn't really real at this point. Or, if it's not that, it's psychosomatic, you know, meaning that you can literally manifest a lot of things. Like, the brain is a very, 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 very powerful thing, and especially when you're going through mental health and some kind of post-traumatic stress, well, yeah, like, take it from me, you can really get messed up, and I think that's really the avenue they're going down. Of course, they could play with what they even suggested through the hallucination or whatever that representation of Brainwave was, when he was saying, you know, when I died, I went into you, and I'm going to take control soon and everything, and that could be possible, but as I said, I think really this is, to put it in one word, psychosomatic for Yolanda. And that's not to say, by the way, that doesn't mean, oh, it's literally all in your head. No, it's a lot more complicated than that. It really is, you know, such a deep-rooted thing that people deal with in real life. And considering how tortured Yolanda has been from this, ever since she murdered Brainwave, you could say, it's definitely something very interesting to get into. As the episode progresses, we see that Blue Valley's getting more prepared for the 4th of July festivities, and there's a little Isaac Boeing missing poster. I don't know who put that there, because I think both his parents are dead or whatever. Maybe he was staying with his grandparents, but either way, yep, just another reminder that Isaac Bowen did actually get absorbed. We also have the cosmic staff's power waning. Now, Courtney does note that it's been days, and the staff does look to be getting better, but it is still so weak. So they did point out that the staff may have indeed hurt Eclipso, but Eclipso did indeed hurt it right back. The reason why I wanted to delve into this quite a bit is just because I do have a little bit of a theory, as I mentioned in my last week's review, in that if I thought actually the staff would be fully conked out, so to speak. I didn't expect it to be coming with a little bit of power, but they do still seem to show that the staff is somewhat, as I said, waning, or like in power, is not really juiced up. And I think this would be a really good opportunity for the show to dive back into that Ted Knight lore, because in season 1, Ted Knight is the original staff constructor, so to speak, and Pat did give that information to Courtney, but just as she was asking about it, he changed the subject. You know, it's a story for another time, because initially I think she was under the impression that Sylvester Pemberton, the other Starman, had made the staff, but that wasn't in fact true. So the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because to kind of revitalize the staff, they could somehow bring Ted Knight back into it, but maybe he's an old wrinkly man or long gone by now. But if they don't want to do that, which is absolutely fine, well, we don't really know what the Sylvester Pemberton storyline's all about, and he's been taking his sweet-ass time to get back to Blue Valley, but, well, I can kind of see where they could go with it now. Now, we don't know whether it is or isn't the real Sylvester. I think it's going to be, for some weird reason. It will just somehow be the case, but you can probably see where I'm going with this. When he gets back, he'll know a bit more about the cosmic staff than probably Pat and Courtney do combined, and he might be able to give it the kind of juice that it needs. But yeah, as for actually how and why, or what, or bloody where as to why this guy's back, I don't know, but he definitely has some expertise about the staff if he is indeed the real Sylvester. In this moment as well, I'm sorry, I don't buy it whatsoever, and I saw a lot of comments buying this, and I was kind of surprised, and that's when Courtney kind of said, he killed Cindy and Isaac right in front of us, and maybe the Shade too, and obviously the Shade's not dead. We know that Isaac kind of is with the soul absorption. At least that's what we can assume. When the souls get absorbed by Eclipso, they're pretty much done and dusted. However, Cindy, I don't buy that, Stargirl. She's not dead. I never thought she died. From the second she was kind of going into one of the shards, little freaking gloopy hole things that kind of swallowed her up, I always took it as she was just imprisoned in some place. I know she was begging for her life, but that's not death to me. It most certainly isn't death. Like, Cindy Berman will, I can tell you, she will be back. And no, I haven't seen any episodes beyond this. I only saw the first 6, so this is truly all speculative theory crafting from me right now, but Cindy will be back. I think she's just kind of maybe trapped in one of the shards, and since Eclipso's power is linked to the Shadowlands, because we had that little discussion between Eclipso and Shade, he says, you know, your powers come from my homeland, human, or something. She's probably like lurking where Dr. McNider is. I can't answer that properly, but I'm just saying Cindy is alive, but just out the picture momentarily at least. But the show does raise good questions, which I didn't even consider, and it is very relevant, just because Stargirl does say to Pat, you know, the weather has only got worse, then why is he still here? He escaped the Black Diamond, so what does he want now? What could Blue Valley mean to someone like Eclipso? Great question. It's true, if you escape the Heart of Darkness, and you can do what you can do as Eclipso, why would you hang around Blue Valley? Now, I guess the show's logic for now, even though they haven't explained it, because this is meant to incite intrigue in the audience, it's like, oh yeah, like what I'm saying now, good question. Why is he sticking around? Maybe it is just because, as we can blatantly tell with his trolling with Yolanda this episode, then at the very end, he's moving on to Beth Chapel next. I feel like maybe he wants to eliminate the new JSA because, well, we don't know the full story behind how he got put away in the Black Diamond and before with the JSM, whatever this bloody secret Pat and Barbara are keeping from the new JSA, but maybe this time round he's making sure he doesn't make the same mistake again, even though these kids probably in his mind aren't as capable as the adult version of the JSA. He doesn't want to take any risks, so he's like, I'm going to take each one of these new JSA members out, then I can dance and skip and hop around the world and absorb souls freely. I rather kind of prepare for that a bit first, which is a logical approach, and I'm guessing that's why he's sticking around Blue Valley, but maybe, just maybe, there is something more. Meanwhile, at the American Dream, it seems like the kind of foundation of their efforts is kind of crumbling them into a bit of bankruptcy, but it's good that Barbara's at the helm, because even though Jordan Marquand had ulterior motives, Barbara really is kind of keeping up the poised, so to speak, mission of what the American Foundation was set up for, or American Dream, or whatever it's freaking called. But in this moment, one thing that very much so intrigued me is that the Shade, well, basically there was no Shade in this episode other than this moment, and one thing we can't forget is that he was wounded. I guess Eclipso's fingernails did puncture his ribs or something for each finger, so he probably has a few holes in him, so to speak. So he was reaching out to Barbara in this moment. You could see the Shade mist on the ceiling of the office room, and where I initially thought he said help me, if you turn the subtitles on, the Shade says Emily. Now, one thing we do know is that the Shade has said to Barbara, you remind me of somebody I used to know. So who is Emily to the Shade? And that is most likely the person of whom he was on about to Barbara, of who she used to remind him of, and I'm sure that pertains to one of his connections to Eclipso. Maybe the reason why he's so against Eclipso and wants, to go after him and make sure he doesn't spread any of his darkness is because his, I don't know, this Emily to him got absorbed, her soul absorbed. I feel like it's predictable, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like I'm on the right path there. I would love your insight if you have anything to add to that. I mean, the obvious choices being maybe this was a romance of his, or maybe he lost his daughter in a similar way to how Charles McNider lost his daughter as well, Rebecca, in the first episode. We could go down a million rabbit holes, but yeah, clearly the Shade in his injured state is reaching out to Barbara, but is saying Emily instead. Meanwhile, with Yolanda, this is when the trolling really does start. She doesn't want to kind of serve this customer who probably is a bit of a regular and causes a bit of troubles. So we have the other waitress serve him instead. She has a little Eclipso gleam in her eye, so that's telling that she's kind of temporarily hijacked. And she pours boiling hot coffee over him. Now, I was thinking, I hope she doesn't get absorbed, because that would be like a really silly kind of act to get absorbed for, if you know what I mean. Because I know, like, Rebecca McNider got absorbed, but I feel like stealing a present isn't such a dark deed to get your soul absorbed, so to speak. So I felt like maybe they were going to do the same thing with, oh, I'm going to absorb your soul now because you poured coffee over it. But no, they didn't, luckily. This is when the mini Bruce Gordon appears, but obviously we know, but the audience knows, but the characters don't know that this is actually the younger Bruce Gordon, aka Eclipso. We have Yolanda offer him a lollipop, and he's there, but the next minute he disappears to just kind of hauntingly stare from outside. And this is when Courtney gets a tap on the shoulder from Cameron, who gets yeeted up against the wall, but in this moment she does indeed spend some time with him. She does get the phone out once again, and I thought, oh man, this is just going to piss him off because this is what happens every time. But no, for once an episode gave them some time together, which led to another scene where Yolanda wanted to get Courtney's help, but she kind of deferred away from it because she saw how much of a good time that she was having with Cameron. Meanwhile, at the pit stop, we have Mike doing his JSA training, you could say. I kind of feel bad for him though, because this is extremely tedious and it does feel like you are a bit of a spare part, and I would like to see Mike get a bit more than just, fixing things. I know he is his father's son and there's nothing wrong being the somewhat sidekick, but at least Pat has indeed got Stripe, but Mike is, I don't know, I just feel like if he goes this way, the next 10 years of his life will always be kind of what Pat went through before he actually even built Stripe, and that's just being constantly bent. So I do hope he gets a bit more. But there is that moment later on in the episode where we have Mike, who is looking at the shards of the Black Diamond, and one thing that's pretty cool about them is it's like they're magnetized to draw back together, which I'm guessing is foreshadowing that somehow, somewhere along the way, they're gonna have to learn that they do need to somehow bring the Black Diamond back together from the shards, as in to fuse it together to be the Black Diamond, which can then house Eclipso once again. I do feel like this episode was predictable in so many little corners, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just as soon as certain things happen, like when Pat left the room, or certain other things likened to that in the episode, you knew what was going to happen next, and that is when Mike had a little bit of a freak out moment after coming into contact with the shards. He starts having leeches over him. It's kind of bringing out one of his fears, and that's when Pat comes back in. Ultimately, the takeaway is, don't touch these again. And why did he keep them? Well, one thing he knows that last time, one of Eclipso's weaknesses was indeed the shard, and he's kind of hoping that it still is. Well, that is when the shards hopefully come back into being the diamond again. Now, how would they go about doing that? I'm guessing, just honestly, I'm guessing, once they learn a little bit more about Bruce Gordon, the lore, what happened to him after he returned back from Diablo Island, as soon as they learn a little bit more of the lore of this demon Eclipso, if you will, they will probably learn ways to reforge the Black Diamond from the shards to be the diamond again, and other little tidbits here and there that will probably be very useful. Back to Yolanda, we see her go back to the church, and the priest is talking to her mother, and screw her mum, like seriously, I can't stand her family. She's just like, how can you drag Father Thomas into your little problems like this? It's just like, I'm pretty sure if you're quite the church-going person, that's one of the things you would do, is to console and speak to somebody you can trust, and that's a priest. Like, it's just, This is when she gets a few more hallucinations. She starts actually seeing Brainwave. He leaves the church door, and then she goes after him, and lo and behold, nobody's there. Later on in class, she sees Henry through the classroom door, so she can't help herself but go out and search for him. Once again, the Brainwave power whammying noise comes through, and, she gets that kind of text saying, "Send me a pic," which is obviously a reference to the first season with what she went through. So this is what I mean about the open. I think it's a bit of both. Obviously, with Bruce Gordon even approaching Yolanda, I think he is bringing certain things out. Like, the send the pic thing is something Eclipso would do. But I think what they are mixing it with, like, for example, when she had the brainwave whammying effect way before Eclipso was even involved in this, that is when it is also psychosomatic. So it's a bit of a really nasty concoction here that Yolanda's dealing with. She's literally dealing with probably the invasiveness of Eclipso, but also her own traumatic stress that her mind is also bringing about as well. Which is, as I said, like a really lethal cocktail for somebody like her to deal with. And not only that, I feel like anyone in that position would get to the point of where she did in this episode with wanting to kind of quit the JSA. Because it's Yolanda as well, they do like to play into the biblical aspects of it, and how Henry was saying, "Because you never forgave me, I'm in a certain place because of you burning," meaning hell. Like, she's trying to get guilt tripped over literally poor Henry's soul is being burned for all of freaking eternity. In this moment as well, we see Brainwave himself, and it's just one big torture fest for Yolanda. And it is a really nice callback because these two characters in the first season were really good, and it also kind of makes you miss a little bit of the build-up that season 1 had, because as much as I am enjoying this season, no matter what, it is more of a slow burner, and I completely understand why. Like, that season story is out the way, but what they had to work with last season with such big, powerful characters such as Brainwave, and then Jake Austen Walker's Henry Jr., it was all very interesting, compelling story, him learning about his father. Would he be good? Would he be bad? And then it turned out he died. Like, there was a lot going for season 1, so to bring these two characters in kind of reminds you, it's a bit bittersweet because it reminds you of how good those particular storylines were in season 1. Not putting down this season 2 storyline, I'm just saying, it's like, damn, I wish these two characters were still somehow in it. Now, after this, she spoke with Courtney, because after noticing that in the middle of a classroom, I think you would want to talk this through with your friend, and Courtney comes up with the idea of telling the team. And this is something which was an oversight of mine, because I think I assumed that the team knew that she killed Brainwave. I don't know why I thought that. I think I just always thought that was explained, but I didn't realize that, Beth and Rick, they had no idea. They just thought Brainwave died in a similar way to his son when all of that stuff was getting collapsed in. Now, Beth was kind of immediately taken back by this, and through to the very end of the scene, she was more or less giving her disapproval, or at the same time is feeling really bad about it, because I'm sure she wanted to console and comfort her friend, but she couldn't help but be like, that's still murder. Whereas Rick was a lot more like, you did what you had to do, so like, I understand that. And this was a really interesting scene, and I give him a lot of kudos for this, because it does explain a lot of the various dynamics that are going on with the different characters, different perspectives. What do you do if you're literally a DC Comics hero and character? And this applies to every single character or good heroic character in the whole of the comic world. Like, what do you do in these certain situations? Sometimes you can't quite justify it morally, but it's also something sometimes that has to be done in a certain situation, because I truly do endorse Yolanda here in how, no matter what way you look at it, this guy murdered his son. In that moment, if she didn't slice his throat, she would have been dead. Absolutely dead. They would probably all be dead, because Brainwave, to be honest, was an insanely overpowered character. He could at any point incapacitate you and just, you're stuck like, ow, with such migraine pain, and then you're just gonna die. But obviously, no matter what, I like how even though you may have done the right thing, it's still something that you need to absorb. That's a human life. Now, the only thing I didn't really like so much about this is just to be a bit critical. I don't think you can compare a human being like Brainwave, who, fair enough, he was evil, but he was still human, to an evil entity of Eclipso. I know what the writers were going for here in this moment, but when they were getting on to the point of where Yolanda is like, I know what's gonna happen when we find Eclipso, we're gonna have to kill him, so who's gonna do it? You, Rick? You, Beth? No, Me. I don't want you to have to live with that guilt, to know that you'll always be a killer in God's eyes. So that means it's on me. I'm gonna have to kill Eclipso to save the rest of you. But, like, I'm not trying to ruin the story or immersion of what they were trying to make us roll along with here. But look, I get the guilt over killing someone like Brainwave. No matter how evil he is, it's a lot more easy to feel guilt over something like that, over a human. Even if they're an evil bastard. But an evil entity, it's just like, when she just says the very line, I don't want you guys to have to live with that guilt, to know that you'll always be a killer in God. Like, a killer of a freaking soul-sucking, literal entity of evil. It's not the same. Who would feel guilty over that? He's a little hobgoblin little mess. Like, nobody cares. But whereas if you had to kill, I don't know, the Wizard or Jordan Markent or Brainwave, I'm totally with you there. It's just, I don't feel like they sucked us in as much as they wanted us to with that comparison when it comes to killing Eclipso, because I'll repeat myself once more, he's a literal embodiment of evil, in depending on which comic iteration, but he is more or less meant to be coming across as that. So, do I feel bad if I had to kill him? No. That may make me sound cold, but really? It's Eclipso. So I think this would be better served if this season's... Like, fair enough if they were talking about the Shade here. Let's just say he was the only antagonist. Then this conversation would make a lot more sense. But you guys see what I'm going for. Overall, I enjoyed a lot of aspects of this scene, just not so much the comparison of how that same guilt that is reflected off Brainwave, it could also be felt through frickin' Eclipso. I don't think so. But anyway, guys, we go back to the church, and Yolanda's talking to the priest. This time, she can't really deal with it anymore. She outright confesses that she's murdered someone, but it turns out the priest isn't even here. It's actually Father Thomas has turned into motherfucking Brainwave. This is that whole scene I was talking about earlier where Brainwave's really confronting her. She's even, you know, floating in the air, being brought towards him telekinetically. He said that he sent his mind into hers. He's a part of her now. And soon he'll be in control because her mind has been made weak for those self-loathing moments for months. Again, I think this is just a little bit of a nod at the capabilities of the character in the comics with how this technically could happen. But as I said, I think it's a mix and match of Eclipso plus her actual trauma manifesting through stress rather than actually Brainwave's mind being sent into her. But I can't fully dispel that, you know, she could be taken over as a host of Brainwave, and that would kind of make some sense with some of the pre-Eclipso Brainwave whammying stuff, but I would lay money that it is more psychosomatic, and then, you know, to throw into it even more, like Eclipso got involved and made it even more hard to reckon with. But overall, like, this was like a really cool moment because Brainwave is such a great character. I think Yvette Monreal, by the way, did an excellent job with her acting chops this episode. I don't think every corner of the episode was solid, but overall, like, what I saw with the characters like Henry and Brainwave being brought back, Yolanda's, or should I say Yvette's performance and stuff, that was all very, very enticing. In this moment as well, we just have Stargirl appear at the church. We don't really know how or whatever, but she just appears there. I'm guessing maybe she pinged Yolanda's phone or something. I don't know. This is one of those things where it's just a bit, I guess, contrived for the sake of like, oh, she had to get here. And another moment that tells me this was more Eclipso, not only to mention the fact that obviously Eclipso was with Yolanda in a diner earlier, so that's why I conclude my, you know, perspective on, is this in her head, is it Brainwave coming back and whatnot, just being a bit of her mind and Eclipso, but also the fact that she used the cosmic staff to snap Yolanda out of it, the cosmic staff not being at full juice, but still humming with a bit of that power, the light against Eclipso's darkness, snapped her out of it, and she was able to kind of be like, oh crap, you know, and talk to Courtney about everything. I was thinking in this moment though, when she like got in the suit and slit Brainwave's throat again, if this show was a bit darker, they could have made that. I mean, this would have been ridiculous though, I do admit it. Like, I'm just saying, imagine how bad it would have been. Because I thought that was quite reckless for her to just go up and slit it again. It's almost like regressing her almost regret for the action that she did have to do back then in season 1, but it was just straight up bang again. It would have been really messed up if that was revealed to be the priest, like Father Thomas, whatever his freaking name was. That would have been so dark though. That would have completely broke the character, obviously killing another innocent, even if it was in a mind whammy. But if they did want to go a bit more R-rated in something that Eclipso would do, Like, that person who she slit the throat of wouldn't have been anyone. It would have just been a hallucination over someone like Father Thomas, and she would have killed an innocent. That would have absolutely that would have been probably too far for the show, but it could have been something that may have been considered. After all of this anyway, though, she says to Courtney that she quits, she can't put on the costume again, and she even projects a little bit. I think this is typical kind of mentality from somebody who's going through something like this. I don't think she's putting the full blame on Courtney, but she's just like, you know, why did you do it? Why did you choose me? I wasn't supposed to be Wildcat. I think she's just kind of looking for some relief of the pressure, you know, that she's currently enduring in this moment. And she ultimately, it comes out in the expression of, you know, I'm never putting that suit on again. Obviously she will, but this might last for some time during the season, I imagine. Maybe Jenny's gonna come back and fill the spot for temporarily, who knows. But obviously Yolanda isn't out the picture forever. And then we saw freaking at Beth's house, the camera pans out of her room and then out of her window to Bruce Gordon literally lurking in the garden, still kind of eating that lollipop. And I kind of like that, because I was thinking, how did the lollipop last this long? To be honest, he could have only just started munching on it, I suppose. But it's kind of like a symbolic and a metaphor to him, you know, still munching on the lollipop and taking in probably sweetness of this whole situation that is torturing. I mean, he enjoys doing this. It's a bit of a process for Eclipso, we can't forget, before he absorbs the soul. So I feel like that was quite a good symbolic moment, using the lollipop with the younger Bruce Gordon as he's giggling outside Beth's window after doing a bit of trolling to Yolanda, in how, like, you know, it's taking the flavor in, the sweetness of the situation, and that is the way his demonic entity views this torture. Like, he feeds off the fear, so to speak. So yeah, I thought that was quite a cool thing, and clearly it's going to be about kind of trolling Beth. But I do hope next episode's a bit more. I'm not saying this episode was not interesting or anything. I just hope that each subsequent episode after this isn't just like the next episode, trolling Beth, the following episode after that, trolling Courtney, or maybe Rick. I feel like they can and they should do that, definitely, because we need each member of the JSA probably getting trolled a little bit and then coming out the other side of it. But I do feel like we need a bit more action-y moments in the next few episodes to keep up the kind of status quo they managed to do last season, because they balanced it quite well last season. There was a bit of mix and match of both, but this season it seems to favor the less action and the more other things, and I feel like they need to find their rhythm again a bit with that, despite like this episode still having plenty of great moments in it. And that was the end of the episode, and that kind of wraps up my thoughts overall of where we're at in the season. Obviously, Beth Chapel is next. I am wondering, obviously, pertaining to her character in the comics, if something really bad could happen. I don't want to get too deep into that because of possible spoilers. I do feel like this season needs to pack a punch, because for me, Cindy isn't it. You know, what I'm trying to say there is maybe someone does need to die, something bad does need to happen to feel some kind of gravity. And I'm not saying we don't feel that with Yolanda's grief and stuff, but we do need to feel something. Like season 1 gave us quite a few moments of that. Like Brainwave Jr., Henry, like that was a big shocking thing. Even the wizard's son and stuff, we weren't really too connected to the characters at that point, but that was still like, damn. So getting back to my point, maybe they tried to give that to us with Cindy, but as I've said, my money is on her being absolutely a-okay, just probably in a bit of an uncomfortable position, being clogged up in a little bit of a shard maybe. But other than that, you know, I need some pack-a-punch. We need something. But other than that, I'm still really enjoying Stargirl as a whole. I just feel like they need to bring maybe the back half of this season is going to be like heavy hitting, like the end of episode 6 was. Maybe they're really serving that main course in the last few episodes. But after saying everything, guys, what did you think of this episode? What do you think of my thoughts? What was your favorite moment? And of course, expand your theories on top of my theories. I read every single comment. As I said, I haven't seen any future episodes beyond this point at this point in time, so I'd love to read your theories. Also, if you want to connect with me a little bit more, you can do so by clicking the top pinned comment, which is where I comment and leave my links to my Discord server, places like my Twitter, other places you can support me, like my merch shop and my Patreon and whatnot. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow starlings in the next video. Goodbye.